Hello there, everybody, and welcome to Legit Economics, where today we're going to be talking about supply and demand curves. So we're not going to be going so much into all of the intricacies of what makes a demand curve downsloping and what makes a supply curve upsloping. That'll be food for another video. But suffice it to say that essentially a demand curve, such as this one right here, is downward sloping because basically on the curves we are making, there's price on the y-axis and quantity on the x-axis. And of course, the higher a price goes, the less quantity of it we're going to consume, which is why a demand curve is downward sloping. Okay. Conversely, as a supplier, if the price for a good is increasing, you're going to want to produce more of that good to capture those profits, which is why they are what they are. But we'll go into that in more detail in another video. So those are the curves, and they can look weird. They can look really awful like this one. They can look kind of more curved. But these are the general patterns of a demand curve and a supply curve. And we can determine these with demand and supply schedules. All right. So, for example, let's say let's say that this is a market in a fictitious economy, in the economy of Fishland, and essentially at $7 a gallon, if prices of gasoline per gallon were $7, then the quantity they're going to consume in the economy is 14 gallons. If it were $6, they'd consume a little bit more at 17 gallons, at 5, a little bit more at 18, and so on and so forth. Okay? And this, of course, makes sense, because if gasoline is really expensive, you're only going to use as much as you need. That's it. And, of course, if gasoline is very cheap, you're going to fill up your car all the time. The supply schedule is just the opposite, right? So if gasoline were $7 a barrel, well, then companies are going to be jumping in and frothing at the mouth to produce as much oil as they possibly can. So they'll produce 300 gallons of gasoline a day. And of course, that quantity decreases as the, I'm sorry, look at this. Look at this mess. Look at this mess. Yeah, that's better. And then, of course, as you can see, as price goes down, then the quantity produced is going down. So obviously at $1, or if it were $0 per gasoline, then of course nobody's going to produce it, because why would you do that? It makes no money. Okay? Look at this nonsense. Sorry, I forgot I had erased that. Okay. So let's graph these schedules. Okay? This would be the graph. Now, obviously, they wouldn't be in straight lines. They would be more in, they'd look more like this. But, to make it easy, let's just graph it like this. And essentially, what we can see is if we look at the arrows, right, at around $2 to $3, there would be a consumption of around 40 gallons. And on the supply schedule, between $2 and $3, we'd find a range of 15 to 110 gallons produced. So it's somewhere in these values is where the equilibrium price and quantity will be found. Let's say that equilibrium price is $2.70 a gallon. At $2.70 a gallon, the quantity demanded and the quantity supplied will be equal. So we would find that at $2.70 we would have 40 gallons of gas. Okay? This would be the equilibrium, EQ, right? All right. However, let's say OPEC decides to constrict the supply. Now, of course, if OPEC lowers the supply, that's not going to affect your demand schedule, because most consumers don't even know what OPEC is. And so, let's say the supply curve goes down, right? OPEC, they constrict oil supply, demand remains the same, so what's going to happen? The price will go up, and the quantity consumed will go down, right? Obviously, because as price goes up, consumers will buy less of the good, okay? So this was equilibrium. So before OPEC cut prices, Equilibrium was $2.70 at 40 gallons consumed. If OPEC cuts supply, then of course that's what this happens. Now, conversely, let's say OPEC now gets into a price war with each other, and they're trying to outproduce the others, and so, yeah, that happens. So now we have supply line dose, yes, and what we're going to see is the opposite, right? So because supply is going up, right, it shifts to the right and demand remains the same. That means the price of the good will go down to, let's say, $2 a gallon. And of course, obviously, if prices go down, what will consumers do? They will buy more. Yes, so we get 50. I'm sorry, that totally just blocked it, didn't it? We'd get 50 gallons consumed. Okay? That's how that works. Now, obviously, on the demand side, the effects are similar. So let's say supply remains the same. Let's look on this one right here. And demand collapses because the coronavirus hits, and so people aren't driving, they aren't going on flights, and whatever the case may be. So the demand curve is going to shift to the left. It's going to shift to the left, but supply of gasoline remains the same. So what's going to happen? The price is going to drop to $3 as those suppliers try to incentivize buying. And that means the quantity consumed, obviously, is going to go down because consumers are consuming less quantity of things, right? So let's say 40 gallons here, and then consumers drop to 30 gallons of consumption. That's what's going to happen, right? This was equilibrium. Equilibrium was $3.50 a gallon at 40 gallons. Demand now drops, supply remains the same, so price and quantity drop. Conversely, let's say supply remains the same and consumers now want to travel everywhere. It's a gasoline frenzy, and demand goes up while supply remains the same. Well, what's going to happen is the price will go up to $4 a gallon as all of a sudden companies need to raise prices in order to ration the goods, and quantity consumed will be increased as consumers are trying to get a hold of all the gasoline they can possibly get, right? So when supply remains the same and demand shifts, and when it shifts to the left, when there's less demand, less quantity and less price will be the result, and just the opposite if demand increases. Okay. Also, you can also have instances, and the most common case is when you have instances where supply and demand are shifting at the same time. So let's take this example in a fictitious economy where supply is being constricted. Maybe OPEC is trying to cut oil again, but the problem is consumers want more of it. So demand shifts to the right and supply shifts to the left, and what you will see is, at least in this case, the quantity will remain the same, but now the price shoots up to $15. $15, I don't know, a gallon. That'd be horrible, wouldn't it? Okay, so that's what would happen in this case. You can have instances where demand shifts far more than supply, and for example, there's an instance of that right here. So let's take the same example. Demand shoots way up, so it goes way to the right on the graph, and then supply is only restricted a little bit. And in this case, what you would see is, let's say there were 100 gallons consumed at $5 a gallon. Well, now because of these shifts, now we have 130 gallons consumed at a price of $15 a barrel or a gallon, whatever the case may be. Okay, so that's how this works. Conversely, you can also have graphs like this, kind of funky looking graphs. So let's say this is the supply and demand curve for the LA Lakers. And of course their stadium can only fit so many people. So let's say, if you can understand my horrible numbers right here. So obviously there's only a certain limit of tickets they can sell. They can only sell up to about 40,000 of them. Right? And so basically the minimum price that they will sell tickets for is $80, let's say. Right? And that's where you have this line right here. And obviously demand So if we had a demand curve right here, all right, if we had two demand curves, they're trying to fill up the stadium. So even if demand goes up, but if the demand's not enough to fill those 40,000, they're going to keep the price at $80. Okay? So demand and demand 1. So if you have very low demand and they can only fill up, I don't know, they can only sell about 13,000 tickets, well, they're going to keep that price at $80, right? Because they're wanting to fill up the stadium. Conversely, if demand goes up a little bit, but still not enough to fill up, let's say they can only sell 33,000 tickets, it's still going to stay at 80 because they're trying to sell the tickets. Okay, so let's get rid of those. Now, it gets interesting when they're able to max out at their 40,000 tickets. Let's say they can only fill up the stadium with 40,000 people. Now what happens is the supply goes straight up. Okay? So let's say demand right here. At this demand, they can sell now those same 40,000 tickets for $100 per ticket. But now let's say they get LeBron James on the team, and now demand goes way up for LA Lakers tickets. Now people really want to go see the games because they want to see LeBron dominate everyone. Well, now what's going to happen? Well, supply is going to stay exactly the same at 40,000, but now the price is going to skyrocket. Okay? It's going to shoot up to $200 per ticket. So you can also have instances where you see supply curves like this. Okay, don't be scared. That's all they mean. Hopefully, by the end of this video, now you can see that these are simply ways to visualize very common market phenomena. Okay, and so those are demand and supply curves. It's that simple. That's how you graph them. That's how they can help us to think through things. You can understand demand and supply abstractly, but for a lot of people, it really helps to see these graphs and be able to visualize why supply and demand does what it does and how markets arrive at equilibrium. So hopefully this video has been helpful for you. And if you have questions, doubts, things to add, comment below. And if you like the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. About every 2 to 3 times a week, hopefully more. I'm trying to ramp it up so that every day we get videos out. But for right now, 2 to 3 times a week, we have videos on all sorts of economic principles, law, philosophy. Those are other aspects of economics that really give flavor to the whole field of study. And if this is something that even remotely interests you, if you want to know how to look at the world, understand why the economy works, why there are crashes, how economies grow, why there's income inequality, all of these kinds of things, hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss these videos. They're jam-packed of information. But thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next one.